And so we will go ahead and get started. My name is Melanie Harris. I am a strategy director with Complete College America, and I have the honor of working with the state of Wisconsin, one of our alliance states. And so I'm happy to introduce Dr. Angela Kellogg, Dr. Jeremy Page, and DeAnn Possehl that will be talking about 15 to finish in Wisconsin. So I'll turn it over to them now.
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna start to share my screen here. So give me a few seconds here. There, thanks for your patience. My name is Angie Kellogg, and I work in the UW System Office of Student Success. My colleagues, if you could both introduce yourselves as well. You'll be seeing them throughout the presentation.
Hi everybody, I'm DeAnn Possehl, the Assistant Provost for Student Success at UW Parkside.
Good afternoon all, my name is Jeremy Page. I'm the Assistant Dean in the School of Education at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
Great, so Melanie and CCA, we are very grateful to you for this opportunity to be here today, and thanks to all of you for attending. We know this is such a busy time of the year as you're gearing up for the start of the academic year, and if you're like me, you're sitting here wondering where the summer went. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We're excited to be here and to share information on our UW System 15 to Finish campaign. We don't have a lot of time here, so I am going to go ahead and get started. And dive into our presentation. So here's our agenda. We're going to start off with just talking about why 15 to Finish campaign in our UW system, give a little overview of our campaign in the University of Wisconsin system, some examples of campaigns from Parkside and Milwaukee. We really want to make sure we have time for Q&A. So if you ask questions in the chat, we'll see if we can address some in writing or get to them at the end of the presentation. But we really want to hear from you. We know many of you also have 15 to Finish campaigns that you've probably been doing longer than we have. So we're hoping to kind of engage in some of those conversations and answer any questions you have as well. I'm sorry, I'm having some issues here. So we thought we'd start by talking a little bit about our UW system campaign. And first, just a really brief overview on our University of Wisconsin system. We have 13 universities across 26 campuses. We used to have 13 two-year institutions called UW colleges, and then our 13 four-year institutions. In 2018, we underwent restructuring that aligned those 13 two-year, formerly the colleges, with 7 of our comprehensive universities. So you'll hear us refer in our presentation to our branch campuses, and with that we mean our two-year institutions. So in our system we have 2 Research 1 institutions in Madison and Milwaukee, and 11 comprehensive universities, as well as our UW Extended Campus. So we're excited today to kind of have a representation. You'll be hearing from both Milwaukee and Parkside, so a research and a comprehensive institution, since the campaign looks a little different at each institution. So where did this start? 2020 Forward was a strategic framework that we had within the UW system. And with that, one of the initiatives within that framework was 360 advising. And you can see in the circle what it had in that framework to improve student success, predictive analytics, intensive advising, and other advising practices. So basically with our 360 advising, what we're attempting to do is really expand high quality proactive advising across the system to reduce time to degree, eliminate equity gaps, and improve student retention and success. And we've done that in a variety of ways. One of those is the credit momentum campaigns that we'll be talking about today. So when we started with 360 advising, one of the first things we wanted to look at is the data and just trying to determine, where do we go with this? And so when we looked at that, we looked at our 4-year graduation rates. And while our graduation rates have increased steadily over time, and we still have plenty of room for improvement. So you can see here for every 10 students, approximately 4, a little over 4 will graduate in 4 years, and a little more than 6 in 6 years. So, while we realize there are a host of reasons students take more time to graduate than 4 years, the reality is that far too few full-time students graduate on time. And as you all know, graduating late or taking an extra year comes at a great cost for students and families. And our student loan debt has been rising every year. We also we've had persistent equity gaps over time that we've been able to narrow a little, but not a lot. So when we look at, we thought, as we're looking at those graduation rates, what impacts those graduation rates? And so we started to look at credit momentum and students' course loads when they begin college. And as you know, the more momentum a student builds early on, the higher the chances they graduate on time. So as you look at our data here, and generally we look at 4 semesters, fall, spring, we also include winterim and summer, but I'll be honest, we couldn't get the summer data in time for the presentation. They're still working on that. So we're just I'm putting fall and spring so that we could include the 2021 data. This also excludes our UW-Madison, they skew the data a bit because of their numbers and their population. So the other institutions here, you can look and see that when we started the campaign, there was about 4 in 10 students, so about 2017 and 18, 40% of our students were taking 24 to 29 credits, or had completed 24 to 29 credits after their first year. So we call that full-time, but not on time. So they, at financial aid, we look at full-time status as 12. So they may have taken full-time status, but they're not at 30 credits. They're not on time for on-time completion. And so the good news is you can see that the year we started our campaign in 2018 and 19, those rates have increased. However, I really wanted to include 20 and 21 because we'll be talking about the impact of COVID throughout this presentation. We're expecting a little dip, and as you can see, that is what happened in the number of students who are taking 30 credits or more. Our 2-year branch campuses, you can see that those percentages look very different in terms of the numbers of students taking 30 or more credits, who have completed 30 or more credits after their first year. Not totally surprising. We have a lot of adult students at our 2-year branch campuses and others with jobs, families, and just other responsibilities that may make taking 15 credits somewhat challenging. So we also looked at how many students have completed 60 credits and 90 credits as well to see if there was a drop off. That's something I would encourage folks to look at as well. And fortunately for us, that did stay fairly consistent in those other buckets. What does that impact? So, my background prior to working at SISTA was working as a director of academic advising and career services. And I know when I was advising students, often I would tell students to take a lighter credit load their first semester because I thought they'd be more likely to be successful. That seemed intuitive, but it really wasn't backed by the data. So we wanted to look at our data and, reflecting national data as well. You can see that students who took a full-time load of 30 or more credits were more likely to be retained and more likely to graduate in both 4 years and 6 years and at all, which, as I said, really aligns with the national statistics too. Also, we disaggregated that data, and it's really critical that that data is disaggregated. And when we did that, we could see that the impact was even more significant for various subpopulations, first-generation students, Pell Grant recipients, underrepresented minority students. There was a disproportionate benefit for some of our underserved populations who, as you can see, if they took 30 or more credits, were much more likely to be retained and graduate in 4 years. And again, aligning with national data, which shows regardless of academic preparedness or preparation, work schedules, socioeconomic categories, data shows that almost all students are more likely to complete with that on-time load. So we wanted to look at COVID. With COVID this year, we knew this was a year like no other, and advisors, we're really trying to get students to register, but we're students completing and their credits. And as you can see, we were fairly consistent in our earned credit ratio, which is total earned credits divided by enrolled credits. But we did take a dip in this last year, which again, probably isn't surprising with all the challenges that students were facing. And again, our institutions will talk more about the impact of COVID. So what does that mean? What do we do with that once we looked at that credit momentum data? Well, 15 to Finish campaign, it's shown to be a proven effective strategy, started at the University of Hawaii. I have been trying to get a site visit to Hawaii for multiple years, but that hasn't quite worked out with the budget. It has expanded throughout the country. Last time I saw CCA reported more than 450 of their member institutions had campaigns, and there's plenty of examples of success, probably many on this line as well. But basically, we took NACADA and CCA's shared principles. That with the campaign, we know not all students will be able to take 15 credits, but all students should be provided with information to make informed decisions about course loads and the benefits of on-time degree completion. With our campaign, our goal is to empower students to make informed decisions about credit load, change that perception, as well, and build that awareness of the benefits of credit momentum and on-time completion, and really call to action, get them to work with their advisors. The challenge is the diversity of institutions in the system. So we wanted the campaign to be somewhat consistent across the system, but also work for their institutions as well. So how did we do that? Here's some different examples of, we had campaign materials. We tried to provide to the institutions. So we created some websites. We'll share those links later. We tried to provide materials, posters, digital media, infographics, gave them banners, swag. One of the things we really wanted to do was in engaging our partners is to get them all on, started in the same foundation. So we brought everyone together pre-COVID when we could meet in person for a workshop for campus teams, and really gave folks, gave campuses their own data to look at. And a lot, in addition to speakers, we had them meet with their campus teams to really dig into the data and possible strategies. And also created a community of practice for folks and from other institutions to communicate. Also provided funding, which was really important. If we're going to tell our institutions to do this, we needed to show commitment. So some campaign funding, as well as attending CCA, because they have some great professional development events as well. And we did a press release, which got some press, as well as a digital campaign for high school students and some of our college students as well. So Facebook, Instagram, and some YouTube pre-roll. I certainly learned a lot about that during that time. So here's some examples of our materials that we created. We went with the 1, 5, 15. So it was a lot of words that had that in it. So finish, accomplish, astonish, that were used in different materials. So here's a sample of some of our materials. We tried to create campus toolkits for the institutions, similar to what CCA and others have done as well. So we offered those materials to folks. Our institutions told us, boy, these are great, but we wanted to be responsive to what they were needing. They said, we need a little more info, a little more data. We have some skeptical faculty and staff. We want more information to share with students and families. So we created a couple infographics, one for students and families and one for faculty, staff, and other stakeholders, but just had a little more data in it about the rationale for the campaign and to try to bust some of the myths that folks have about what the campaign is. So our different institutions, originally we created the campaign thinking all the institutions would use these materials. We wanted to provide a consistent campaign to amplify the message. We should have known better. And for those of you who work in a system or statewide organization, that's probably not surprising. We have diverse institutions who do things in different ways. So our institutions wanted to create their own messaging. Some did. Some were happy to use what we had, but also some really felt more comfortable with the 30 credits a year versus 15 in a semester. So as you can see here, it ended up looking different. Eau Claire went with a 30 to thrive message. Platteville, 15 to finish, but kind of use their own materials. Whitewater, a finish in 4, and UW Stout, 30 a year gets you here. So even with COVID, we had to step back and think, what does that message look like now during this pandemic and the move to virtual advising and instruction? So institutions tended to continue to maintain that stay on track message. Some switched to 30 credits a year as well. So they made changes, which you'll hear a little bit more, because we recognize, obviously, they were also dealing with a lot of other priorities, keeping students healthy, safe, and retained. So we've tried to maintain flexibility to meet the needs of the institutions and the times we're in. Just really briefly too, in addition to campaign materials, we encourage institutions to really look at policies and practices as well. And institutions integrated credit momentum into 4-year graduation contracts, navigate campaigns, canvas courses, different events, really examine policies and practices that might serve as a barrier to on-time degree completion. So we're excited that we have a couple institutions who are going to share examples of what they've done with their campaigns at their institutions. So with that, I am going to turn it over to DeAnn.
Hi, everyone. Just to give you a little context, UW Parkside is a small regional campus that serves a large number of low-income, first-generation, underrepresented students. And so we actually started this work in 2013. We focused on new student orientation, and I would say it was sort of informal. We used the CCA materials and embedded them into our orientation sessions, and then we did some soft follow-up with students who left orientation with less than 12 credits. If you want to flip, Angie, to our So then we started developing our own materials, and we started with the development of a logo. We used the graduation hat and the 15, and we created a website, and we dug into our data, and we use data in our strategy and in our campaign materials, but this is also what we used when we were working with advisors to help them understand why this was an important thing for them to do and work with students on. And then 3 or 4 years ago, we began with the continuing student campaign, and we did posters and stickers and table tents and electronic sign messages. And again, look, we varied it each year. I'm showing you a little bit about what it looked like one year compared to the next year. And then this last year, because almost everything was virtual, we really had to go into the use of video, as social media, email tags, and reminders through Navigate. So it sort of has, we try to refresh it each year. And that's just a little taste of what our campaign has looked like for both our new students and our continuing students. So if you want to advance, I just want to share a little bit about our data. So we have been making, I think, really good forward progress. So you can see in 2013, only 30% of our students were registered for 15 credits. And over the last 7 years, through consistent messaging and follow-up, we have made good progress. And over 75% of our students, all of our students, so that includes low income, underrepresented populations, are enrolling in 15 credits in the first term. So if you want to advance, Angie, to the next piece. So we, similar to the UW, we are tracking patterns over time, and we're disaggregating our data. And while we've been making forward progress in this one, which is completing 30 credits in the first year, you can see that that progress is, it's not having the same impact for our Black students. And then when COVID hit, you can see that COVID had the most significant impact on our Hispanic and Black students. And so we obviously, as a campus, have more work to do to address the inequities that existed pre-COVID around completing 30 credits, but that were exacerbated this last year, and how we will start to think about those moving forward. So if you want to advance, Angie. So lessons learned from the last 7 years is know your data, monitor, share results. I mean, we talk about this all the time on the campus. We meet with advisors regularly. We meet with the colleges regularly. We try to personalize. I'd recommend personalizing the messages to your institution and getting other folks involved in developing those messages. Continually reminding staff that this really is about informed choice. I mean, students can choose to do, but they need to know what options are available and what the outcomes could be. And don't let perfect be the enemy of good, just do it. And we have gotten significant gains for not a lot of effort at this point. So, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. So if you want to flip to the next slide, Angie. So one of the things we're seeing is the long-term impact in terms of students continually enrolling in 15 credits is not sticking for our underrepresented students. So as they go into sophomore and junior year, we're not seeing that same thing that we're seeing with our other students. COVID has had a huge impact. You know, students are working more. There's probably, you know, they're concerned about time, nervous about the online learning. All of those things are there and have had an impact. Some structural barriers are obviously emerging, that class offerings, DFW rates, schedule. And then the other question is, do we have the right support structures? And so are we creating the climate that students feel like they can, that they belong here, that they, are there people that they can reach out to, but also like, are there opportunities to use our winter and our summer sessions to be able to continue that credit accumulation? And so we will be continuing to work on those things to make sure that we're providing the right supports, that our classrooms are welcome, because our goal is to close the gap so that all students see significant gains in their credit accrual over time. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy.
Good afternoon again. A little bit of context is DeAnn provided for Parkside. Milwaukee is an urban seated institution of over 20,000. And we have the interesting dual mission of both being a Research One institution and having an access mission. And so this plays out in many different interesting ways that I'll talk a little bit about. We've been doing 15 to finish like work for about 5 years as a campus. We started by looking at things from a Y30 context. So much of what I'll share is a little bit about the way to message and get stakeholders in and around the importance of this message. And framing it from a getting 30 in an academic year resonated more strongly as we began to have this campus conversation. You may be asking if, when you heard my introduction, Assistant Dean of the School of Education, why I'm here in this role. The reality is we've been doing a lot of this work and driving a lot of this work on campus through volunteer and folks who have raised their hand. So our ad hoc group of folks who are driving this work on campus pull from academic advising areas, folks who work with meta majors in financial aid and student success, and then in school college administration. We started 5 years ago by building a bit of a base of understanding how our students are doing around some of the traditional metrics in credit accumulation. Many of those you saw Angie detail at the system level. And then we also did some things kind of localized within school, college, and areas to combat mythology that our students couldn't do this, that 15 was too much to consider. We replicated the off-cited Hawaii study here within the School of Education and showed once again that pre-college academic performance and demographic characteristics didn't really have an influence on a student's ability to be successful by taking 15 per term or 30 in an academic year. We begin to mobilize our work through developing action plans. We did so really firmly in the 1920 academic year, where we identified responsible parties for individual tasks and deadlines and status updates so that we could all share out within the ad hoc group that's been established, but also talk to the campus about what we're doing around these efforts. Coming as a surprise to no one, much of our efforts were paused during our last academic year, in part because so much of our efforts to message this to students required physical spaces and students being on our campuses. Angie, if you could hit the next slide. So as Angie and DeAnn detailed, a lot of our materials were putting images and messages in front of students all over campus. So banners, window clings, digital displays, all over our dining spaces and residence halls as well. We use Navigate, the EAB retention platform on our campus. And so what we would do were to grab student populations within academic units who had registered for 12 to 15 credits and had pulled lists and sent those out to those units, encouraging them to reach out to students and say, hey, you've got 4 classes, might you consider a 5th? And here's why that might be beneficial for you. Social media has been a constant for us, both pre-pandemic and currently, using Facebook and Instagram campaigns to further send the message in the places that we know students are. Next slide, Angie. You can see some of the examples from our campus. They mesh pretty nicely with what Angie profiled. Basically, we took a lot of the system stuff and we matched it to UWM branding. So you can see we're black and gold. Our value proposition in talking to this a lot of times focused on 2 pieces. And one is faster path to graduation. And the second piece is the amount of money that you will save in taking 15 or 30 per academic year. We have a tuition threshold here at UWM. So anything above 12 credits is not an additional cost. So framing things like buy 4 classes, get 1 free, and those type of things, we've tried to get creative in the way that we get that message to land and resonate with our students. Next slide. We are in the preliminary analysis of impact, essentially a lot of this messaging and a lot of these efforts. And what we're doing is looking at term-to-term comparisons. At the first point here, the 30,000 foot view of our campus population, you can see over on the left-hand side, fall 18 to fall 19, we're seeing average credit loads increase across campus incrementally in both fall and spring terms. And as you make your way to the table on your right, the percentages of students who are taking 15 or more are increasing within the overall campus population. You can see 2.7% fall 18 to fall 19 and 3.2% spring 19 to spring 20. Next slide, Angie. As we continue to dive deeper into student cohorts and look at different things like demographic characteristics, we're seeing some positive indicators here as well. Over on the right, we're seeing the percentages of students who are taking 15 or more credits per term increasing as we look across first year, sophomore, junior, and senior cohorts. So really some encouraging entry level analyses as we look at credit accumulation within an academic year. Next slide. So as we shift to some things that we've learned along the way, you heard Angie talk a little bit about this and DeAnn as well. We often experience some resistance and starting from the place that essentially assuming our students can't do this and that they're not capable of doing that. Particularly with an access mission, there's been historical reticence to nudge students to take on this type of academic load. And so, you know, our students work, they can't handle the academic river, they can't take 5 classes. There's no way within this particular term, within this major, that 15 credits are going to be possible. So we found success in framing the conversation anytime we have it with, this might not work for all students, but this is why the data shows that it matters. And this is why it's an important message to send to our students. The key stakeholders and leadership are really good messengers to the 15 to finish message. When a provost encourages deans and department chairs to think through and how we might localize messages to 15 credits per term, there's a lot of weight and a lot of resonance when we have those campus dialogues in places that have historically been reticent to encourage students to do so. Next slide. Our upcoming campaign for this year is we're going to continue to reinvent and expand our market reach. We're going to put stuff in our athletic centers, try to find again, as we come back to campus to a certain degree, where can we put messages where we haven't with students? We want to start messaging earlier. So how within prospective student audiences can we put in pieces within communication plans for an admitted student who might not yet enroll, the importance of normalizing 15 to finish. We're looking at late starting classes and other opportunities for credit accumulation to happen where students might be struggling with things like academic probation. And then we're also looking deeper into data and evaluation of efforts around things like Navigate campaigns and the new academic planner module that we're deploying on campus. Next slide. Here's an example of some of the questions we're investigating actively right now, is looking from a couple different vantage points in credit accumulation. One is by academic program. So how are electrical engineering students progressing on this versus English majors, layering demographics into that to really understand more about our student populations in these key areas, so that we can then take those messages to areas where we know students aren't making that type of credit accumulation progress that we want them to, and basically going where the needs are most important. So does residential status matter? What is one semester and 1 year graduation rates as we look at these 3-dimensional perspectives of student progress towards credit accumulation? Next slide. And I'm going to hand it back to Angie to wrap us up.
I'm sorry about that. You would think I've just started doing this. I have no idea why my video was doing that. But thank you so much for DeAnn and Jeremy for sharing your experiences with the campaigns at the institutions. These are 2 institutions that we're highlighting that have really done a lot with their campaigns, and they've evolved over time. But all of our institutions really took this campaign and ran with it in different ways. And some lessons that we learned, some of it had already been discussed by DeAnn and Jeremy, but that issue of challenging assumptions. When we asked the campus, each campus had identified a campaign coordinator, and that was our contact on the system level. And they said one of the biggest challenges was the skepticism and misconceptions among academic advisors, among their own staff. And Jeremy discussed that as well. Also, the thought that this campaign was saying that this was for all students. And so we had to keep reiterating that message that, we're still accounting for individual circumstances. This isn't for all students, but it is for a lot. And having access to that information about the benefits of on-time degree completion and importance of credit momentum was critical. Data played that really important role. We tried to find ways to get data in the hands of institutions, and they had it themselves through their IR department as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that more in next steps too, but that data was really critical to challenging just some of those misconceptions. Because as we said, what we tell students matters. And I think that, is a lot of the foundation of this campaign. Collaboration was key, not only within the institutions, but across the system, and really that importance of engaging different stakeholders in sharing that message. We certainly found that we really had to continually evolve. Like I said, originally we thought there was going to be one message across, and we realized, no, institutions need to do what works for them and their students. Obviously, COVID changed a lot too, and we had to evolve there as well. And our data, as we dig deeper into different parts of the data, it also informs us in the campaign in different ways as well in terms of our next steps. We really still are very early in our campaign, and we are very much still learning and growing as well. So just wanted to share with you a few next steps for us. As I mentioned, the importance of data, one of the things we really want to do is make that data more accessible. A lot of IR offices are swamped, and sometimes difficult for folks to get data. So we've worked with our Office of Policy Analysis and Research to create dashboards, interactive dashboards that institutions will have where they can easily disaggregate the data and look at it in different ways. So we're finalizing those. I was going to show those today, but we're putting the finishing touches on those and hope to get those in the hands of our institutions within the next month. As I mentioned earlier, now we're also going to work on creating more adaptable campaign resources. Our resources were very much 15, and now with more institutions going to 30, particularly during this last year, we really want to make our the materials that are a little more flexible and adaptable so they can be branded with the institution colors and can reflect the different ways the campaign is being run on the various campuses. Facilitating communities of practice is one of the beauties of a system and or a state, and I'm sure you all have partner institutions as well too that you may work with, but we love to get together and share ideas. And so we've shared ideas, on websites, trying to pull together campaign coordinators and others to have discussions. What are the challenges? What do you do? And what are some good ideas? And that as well. The campaign is one piece in terms of some of the messaging, but DeAnn and Jeremy also talked, where the rubber hits the road is really working with those institutional policies and practices to promote on-time completion. When we asked what some of the challenges were, some of the institutions were struggling to put that message out because they didn't have available courses. So course availability was an issue. Some institutions are, trying to work on creating more winterim classes or summer classes. So if students, for many reasons, and particularly last year, haven't been able to take a full load, how can they make up? Academic maps are another thing some institutions are working with. And, also a lot of institutions changed their policies as a result of COVID and loosened some of the restrictions, asking, hey, if it worked during this last year, is it something you may look at more permanently? I believe Parkside has done a real deep dive into looking at some of those policies and practices that might, impact retention and on-time degree completion as well. And also we're beginning to efforts to promote other CCA strategies. Certainly Momentum Year is one that makes sense. And we're really going to do a little deeper dive into Purpose First as well, because it all ties together too. So those are some areas that we are looking on in terms of next steps. So I know that was a lot of information, and I know I tend to talk kind of fast, but we wanted to make sure in the short 45 minutes that we had time for question and answer as well. I've seen a few questions in the chat, but we'll turn it back to Melanie. Open that up.
I was muted. Sorry about that. Thank you so much. I'll ask all of our panelists to come back on screen. And Angie, if you could stop sharing your screen so we could see everybody. We have had a few questions come in. So let me get those ready. How, and I know DeAnn, you answered part of this in the chat, but how are you all currently addressing remediation needs? Is there a system-wide movement and approach, or does each institution address this differently at this point?
I mean, I could speak to it a little bit. At a system level, you know, there has been a math project. Its focus has been mostly first about developing math pathways, and second, looking at the use of multiple measures. And then third, around trying to get some co-requisite support in place across the system. But it's not been what I would call a systemic effort in terms of every campus is approaching it differently. So as I put in the chat, we've been working on this for 4 years. And so we have put math pathways in place. We have developed multiple measures. We have developed a co-requisite support model, and we have eliminated remediation starting this fall. So we believe in the whole leaky pipeline thing that, that the Dana Center promotes, and that you lose so many students through the various steps of remediation, that there's much more to be gained by just providing extra support. And our data over the last 2 years has shown that that is actually the case. And so we'll see what impact this has on our credit accrual, particularly for our Hispanic and Black students, because those were the students that were sitting in our remedial coursework.
And similarly at UWM, I think that the one other thing that might be additive to the ways DeAnn talked about Parkside looking at it is we're also looking at areas like Summer Bridge and other outside of a typical academic term to promote opportunities for credit accrual or things that are traditionally considered remediation, and making those available kind of in addition to the traditional academic calendar.
Perfect. Another question that came in is regarding the Navigate campaigns. Were those appointment campaigns or mass messaging?
Yeah, so we are a pretty decentralized academic area within our campus. And so I also work to coordinate some of our Navigate efforts on campus. And what we would essentially do is take these lists to schools and colleges and have them make the approach their own as best as they see fit. So it took both forms, you know, where we had advising units that had capacity. It would be advising appointment campaigns. In other areas, it was nudging through emails, and hopefully in things like text messaging to students who, you know, if you have questions about taking on an additional course, set up an appointment with your academic advisor, or respond to an email to get more information. So it's kind of where academic units wanted to make that approach best work for them.
And we're relatively new in the Navigate world, about 1.5 years. So we did it a couple different ways. We embedded it into some of the app in terms of to-dos and some push notifications. And so around advising time, you know, when we're giving them a push notification that says, you know what, it's time to talk to your advisor, there'd be a friendly reminder about, you know, 15 to finish. Then we would do some follow-up with students that were, like, for example, freshmen, we have them check their schedule, new freshmen, check your schedule. And oh, by the way, if you don't have 15, you still have time to add one. So gentle kind of like nudges. So we've dabbled a little on the side, I would say, with Navigate.
And then the last question, how have you all gotten buy-in from from the campuses, from like the system level down, of communicating, here's a campaign, it's great? Are you having workshops? Are you sending emails? Or what does that look like?
Well, I could start with, so we're talking about buy-in from the campus constituency, not the students, right? I mean, so we actually had our provost, very much like what Jeremy said, this was embedded as one of the strategic initiatives within our academic plan. And so it did elevate it up there. And then we did a lot of road shows. So we went to all the colleges and we shared the data, and, and then we went back and shared the results, and then we went back again. And so we did that around over the course of a couple of years, because people like to see the loop closed. And so we met with a lot of different constituent groups to help them understand both faculty and advisors and some of what I would call the student affairs support areas, to make sure everybody was kind of on the same page. Admissions, all of them sharing the data and the results.
Yeah, I'll add that I think we've done a good mix of trying to talk locally within our own campus community via the data of our students, and then matching that really well with partnerships that we've had established with other higher ed organizations. So, our partnerships with Complete College America, we have a Higher Education Regional Alliance. So as all of these campuses are talking about the power of taking 15 credits per term, it helps folks who typically are pretty much just familiar with our own local student population and encourages them to think differently, because somebody from the outside is saying it, right? And we've got data locally to match up with what we're hearing in national or regional alliances that helps that message land as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know we are close to time, so I want to thank Angie, DeAnn, and Jeremy for joining us today. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. We do have another CCA Live on stackable credentials on September 9th. I encourage you to join us for that. Again, you will receive an email with a short evaluation, recording, and the resources and PowerPoint shared today. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.